The sun was dipping low over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as the waves crashed gently against the shore of Crescent Beach. It was a perfect summer day, the kind where laughter echoed through the salty air and the world felt full of endless possibilities. Three girls, Amara, Lila, and Zoe, ran barefoot along the sand, their voices mingling with the squawk of seagulls. They were best friends, inseparable since middle school, each with dreams bigger than the small coastal town they called home. Amara, with her quick wit and fearless spirit, was the unofficial leader. Lila, the quiet dreamer, always had a sketchbook tucked under her arm, capturing the world in soft pencil strokes. And Zoe, the heart of the group, had a laugh that could light up even the gloomiest day. That afternoon, they were celebrating the end of their junior year, planning a summer of adventure before the real world came knocking. But as the sun sank lower, something shifted. The beach grew quiet. Their towels and flip-flops lay abandoned near the dunes. The girls were gone. No one saw them leave. No one heard a scream or a cry for help. It was as if the ocean itself had swallowed them whole. The town was shaken. Search parties scoured the coastline for days, helicopters buzzing overhead, boats combing the waters. Flyers with their smiling faces, Amara's confident grin, Lila's shy smile, Zoe's infectious joy, were plastered on every lamppost, storefront, and community board. The police chased every lead, from runaway theories to whispers of foul play, but nothing added up. Their phones were found in their bags, untouched. There were no footprints leading away from the beach, no signs of a struggle. It was a mystery that gripped the town, the kind that kept people up at night, wondering what could have happened to three vibrant girls on a day so full of light. 8 months later, the world had moved on, but the wound was still raw for those who loved them. Amara's mom still set a place for her at the dinner table, unable to let go. Lila's little brother kept her sketchbook on his nightstand, flipping through her drawings like they held some secret clue. Zoe's dad walked the beach every evening, staring at the waves as if they might give her back. Hope was fading, replaced by a heavy, aching grief. The case had gone cold, the headlines replaced by newer tragedies. But then, something extraordinary happened. A pilot, flying a routine route over the Pacific, spotted something unusual on a tiny, uninhabited island, a speck of land barely visible on any map. He dipped lower, his heart pounding as he saw shapes moving below, shapes that didn't belong on a deserted rock in the middle of nowhere. What he saw would change everything. But let's step back for a moment, to a different story, one that happened just days before the girls vanished. It was a crowded bus in the heart of the city, the kind where every seat is taken, and the air smells faintly of coffee and sweat. Jaden, a black teenager with a quiet strength and a kind heart, was heading home from his part-time job at the local diner. He was tired, his feet aching from hours on his feet, but when a pregnant woman stepped onto the bus, struggling to balance with her heavy bag, Jaden didn't hesitate. He stood up, offering her his seat with a small smile. She looked at him, her eyes tired but grateful, and sat down with a sigh of relief. As the bus rumbled on, she scribbled something on a piece of paper, her hands trembling slightly. When she handed it to Jaden, he tucked it into his pocket without reading it, thinking it was just a thank you note. He had no idea that those few words would soon turn his life upside down. That note, crumpled and unassuming, sat in Jaden's pocket for days. He forgot about it, caught up in the chaos of his own life, school, work, and the constant pressure to keep his family afloat. His mom worked 2 jobs, and his little sister looked up to him like he was a superhero. Jaden didn't have time for mysteries or daydreams. But when he finally pulled out that piece of paper, what he read made his heart stop. It wasn't just a thank you. It wasn't a random gesture. The words scrawled in shaky handwriting hinted at something bigger, something connected to the very beach where Amara, Lila, and Zoe had vanished. Was it a coincidence? Or was Jaden holding a clue to the mystery that had haunted the town for months? Back on that uninhabited island, the pilot circled lower, his radio crackling as he called in what he saw. The shapes below weren't animals or debris, they were people. 3 figures moving slowly, their clothes tattered, their faces turned upward toward the sound of the plane. His hands shook as he reported it, his voice barely steady. Could it be them? Could Amara, Lila, and Zoe still be alive after all this time? And if they were, how had they ended up on an island no one knew existed? What had happened in those 8 long months? The pilot's discovery sent shockwaves through the town, reigniting hope and questions no one could answer. But the truth was far stranger than anyone could have imagined, and it was tied to the note in Jaden's pocket, a note that held secrets no one saw coming. Jaden's life was already complicated. Growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, he'd learned to keep his head down and work hard. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him. The note wasn't just a message. It was a map, a puzzle, a key to something he couldn't yet understand. When he showed it to his best friend, Marcus, they pored over it under the dim light of a street lamp, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. The truth is in the tides, it read, followed by a string of numbers that looked like coordinates. Marcus, always the skeptic, laughed it off at first. "You're telling me some lady on a bus gave you the key to solving a missing persons case? Come on, man." But Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that this was real. The coordinates pointed to a spot in the Pacific, not far from where the pilot had made his discovery. Was it possible? Could a random act of kindness have pulled Jaden into the heart of a mystery that had stumped everyone? The town buzzed with rumors as news of the pilot's sighting spread. People gathered at the diner, at the grocery store, at the church, whispering theories. Some said the girls had run away, chasing some teenage fantasy. Others swore they'd been taken, victims of something sinister lurking in the shadows of their quiet town. The police reopened the case, but they were as lost as ever. No one could explain how 3 girls could end up on an island hundreds of miles from home, or why they hadn't been found sooner. And no one knew about the note in Jaden's pocket, not yet. He wasn't sure who to trust, or if he should trust anyone at all. The words on that paper burned in his mind, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. As Jaden wrestled with what to do, the pilot's story took a strange turn. He landed his plane and spoke to the authorities, his face pale as he described what he'd seen. The figures on the island weren't just standing there. They were signaling, desperately waving what looked like a tattered piece of cloth. But when rescue teams were dispatched, the island was empty. No girls, no cloth, no sign that anyone had been there at all. The pilot insisted he wasn't mistaken, but doubt crept in. Had he imagined it? Was it a trick of the light, a cruel mirage in the vast ocean? Or was something else at play, something that didn't want the girls to be found? The mystery deepened, and Jaden, with that note in his hand, was starting to realize he might be the only one who could unravel it. What happened to Amara, Lila, and Zoe? How did they vanish without a trace? And what did the pilot really see on that lonely island? And why did a stranger on a bus hand Jaden a note that seemed to hold the key to it all? The answers are out there, waiting in the tides, but they come with a cost. This is a story of friendship, courage, and secrets buried deeper than the ocean floor. Stick with me, because the truth is wilder than you think, and we're just getting started. Jaden sat on the edge of his bed, the note unfolded in his hands, its edges worn from being handled too many times. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering lamp on his desk, casting shadows that danced across the walls. His little sister, Kaylee, was asleep in the next room, her soft snores barely audible through the thin walls of their apartment. The words on the paper stared back at him. The truth is in the tides, followed by those strange numbers, latitude and longitude. He was sure of it now. He'd checked them on his phone, using a map app he barely understood, and they pointed to a spot in the Pacific, a place so remote it was just a blue void on the screen. Jaden's heart thudded as he traced the words with his finger. How could a random woman on a bus know anything about Amara, Lila, and Zoe? And why give the note to him? He wasn't a detective, just a 17-year-old kid trying to make it through high school and keep his mom from worrying too much. But something about that note felt like a weight, like it was pulling him into something he couldn't walk away from. Downstairs, his mom was still at work, pulling another late shift at the hospital. Jaden glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. He should have been asleep hours ago, but his mind was racing. The news about the pilot sighting had been all over town, on every TV screen and social media feed. People were talking about the girls again, their names whispered like a prayer or a curse. Amara, Lila, Zoe. 3 names that had become a part of Crescent Beach's story, a wound that wouldn't heal. Jaden didn't know them personally, not really. He'd seen them around school, heard their laughter in the hallways, noticed how they seemed to light up any room they were in. They were the kind of girls who left an impression, even on someone like him, who kept to himself most of the time. But now, with this note in his hand, he felt connected to them in a way he couldn't explain. He thought back to that day on the bus, trying to picture the woman's face. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a loose bun and eyes that seemed to carry 1,000 stories. She'd been struggling with her bag, her belly round with pregnancy, and Jaden hadn't thought twice about giving up his seat. It was just something his mom had drilled into him. Help people, be kind, do the right thing. But when she'd handed him that note, her hand lingered on his for a moment, her gaze intense, like she was trying to tell him something without words. "You're a good kid," she'd said, her voice low and rough, like she hadn't spoken in a while. Then she was gone, stepping off the bus at the next stop, disappearing into the crowd. Jaden hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now he wished he'd asked her name, or why she looked at him like she knew him. Marcus had been no help, of course. Jaden had shown him the note the night before, hoping his friend's knack for puzzles would make sense of it. They'd sat on the stoop outside Jaden's building, the street lamp buzzing above them, casting a yellow glow over the cracked sidewalk. Marcus, with his lopsided grin and endless energy, had laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. "Man, you're telling me some random lady gave you a treasure map? What is this, a movie?" But when Jaden showed him the coordinates, Marcus's grin faded. He pulled out his phone, typed them in, and zoomed in on the map until it was just a speck in the ocean. "That's nowhere, Jaden. Like, middle of the Pacific nowhere. You think this has something to do with those girls?" Jaden didn't know what to think, but the timing felt too strange to be a coincidence. The pilot sighting, the coordinates, the note, it was like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together yet. Meanwhile, the town was buzzing with its own theories. At the diner where Jaden worked, the regulars had their own stories. Old Mr. Thompson, who came in every morning for black coffee and a slice of pie, swore the girls had been kidnapped by some secret organization. "You read about that stuff online," he'd mutter, tapping his fork on the counter. "People disappear, and it's always something bigger than we think." Sarah, the waitress who'd been there longer than Jaden had been alive, thought they'd run off to start new lives somewhere far away. "Kids do that sometimes," she'd say, wiping down the counter. "They get tired of this town, and just go." But Jaden didn't buy it. Amara, Lila, and Zoe didn't seem like the type to just leave without a word. They had families, friends, plans. Something had happened to them. Something no one could explain. The pilot's story only made things murkier. His name was Tom Harper, a grizzled guy in his 40s who'd been flying routes over the Pacific for years. Jaden had seen him on the news, his face drawn and tired as he spoke to reporters. "I know what I saw," he'd said, his voice steady, but his eyes haunted. "3 people, waving a cloth, like they were trying to get my attention. I'm not crazy." But when the rescue team reached the island, a rocky, barren place with no trees or fresh water, they found nothing. No footprints, no scraps of cloth, no sign that anyone had been there. The police called it a false alarm, but the town wasn't so sure. People started whispering about ghosts, about mirages, about things that couldn't be explained. Jaden overheard a group of fishermen at the diner talking about the tides, how they could hide things, carry things away. It sent a chill down his spine, those words echoing the note in his pocket. Jaden's mom noticed he was distracted when she got home that night. She sat at the kitchen table, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift, and looked at him with that mom stare that could see right through him. "What's going on, Jaden?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. He wanted to tell her about the note, about the coordinates, about the way his stomach twisted every time he thought about the girls. But he didn't know where to start. What if it was nothing? What if he was just chasing shadows, wasting time when he should be focused on school or helping with Kaylee? "Just tired," he mumbled, avoiding her eyes. She didn't push, but he could tell she didn't believe him. She never did when he tried to hide something. The next day, Jaden went back to the beach. He didn't know why exactly, just that he needed to be there to see the place where it all started. Crescent Beach was quieter now, the summer crowds long gone, replaced by a gray sky and a biting wind. He stood near the dunes, where the girls' things had been found 8 months ago, and tried to picture it. Amara laughing, Lila sketching, Zoe splashing in the waves. What could have happened to make them vanish? He kicked at the sand, frustration building in his chest. That's when he saw it, a glint of something half buried near the base of a dune. He knelt down, his fingers brushing away the sand to reveal a small, silver bracelet. It was simple, with a tiny charm shaped like a star. His heart skipped a beat. He'd seen that bracelet before on Zoe's wrist, in a photo from one of the missing posters. How was it still here, after all this time? Jaden slipped the bracelet into his pocket, his mind racing. The police had combed this beach 100 times. How could they have missed this? He looked out at the ocean. the waves rolling in with a rhythm that felt almost alive. "The truth is in the tides," he whispered to himself, the words from the note echoing in his head. He didn't know what it meant, but he was starting to think the answer wasn't on this beach. It was out there, somewhere in the vast, uncharted blue. He thought about the pilot, about the island, about the figures waving for help. What if they were still out there? What if the note was a map to finding them? Back at home, Jaden couldn't sit still. He pulled up the coordinates again, staring at the map on his phone. The spot was hundreds of miles from Crescent Beach, a place no one would stumble across by accident. He didn't have a boat or a plane or any way to get there. But he couldn't just do nothing. He thought about going to the police, but what would he say? "Hey, some lady on a bus gave me a weird note, and I think it's about those missing girls." They'd laugh him out of the station. Or worse, they'd start asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Jaden wasn't exactly on their good side, not after that time he and Marcus got caught sneaking into the old warehouse by the docks. It was just a dumb dare, but the cops didn't see it that way. He decided to tell Marcus everything. They met up at the park, sitting on a bench near the swings where they used to play as kids. Jaden showed him the bracelet, the star charm glinting in the fading light. Marcus's eyes widened. "No way, man. You found this on the beach? That's Zoe's, right?" Jaden nodded, his throat tight. Marcus leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "This is getting weird, Jaden. Like, horror movie weird. You sure you want to get mixed up in this?" Jaden wasn't sure of anything, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to find that note, that bracelet. It was like the universe was nudging him towards something, even if he didn't know what. Marcus agreed to help, mostly because he couldn't resist a mystery, even if he acted like he was above it. They spent the next few hours digging into whatever they could find online about the girls, the beach, the pilot sighting. Most of it was speculation, wild theories about aliens, cults, even mermaids. But one post on a local forum caught Jaden's eye. It was from someone anonymous, claiming to have seen a strange boat near Crescent Beach the night the girls disappeared. It was small, no lights, just sitting out there in the dark. The post read, "I thought it was fishermen, but it didn't move for hours." Jaden's pulse quickened. A boat could have taken the girls somewhere. To that island, maybe. But why? And who was behind it? The more Jaden thought about it, the more questions he had. Who was the woman on the bus? How did she know about the coordinates? And what did any of it have to do with him? He remembered her eyes, the way they seemed to see right through him. It wasn't just gratitude for the seat. It was like she'd chosen him, like she knew he'd do something with that note. But what? He wasn't a hero. He was just Jaden, the kid who flipped burgers at the diner and helped his sister with her math homework. Yet here he was, holding a bracelet that might belong to a missing girl, a note that might lead to answers, and a feeling in his gut that he was in way over his head. As the days passed, the town's obsession with the pilot's sighting grew. People started organizing their own search parties, renting boats to head out to the coordinates, where the island was supposed to be. But the ocean was vast, and the island was little more than a rumor. Some said it wasn't even on most maps, a forgotten speck that only showed up on old nautical charts. Jaden overheard his boss at the diner talking about it, saying the island had a bad reputation among fishermen. "They call it Ghost Rock," he said, wiping down the counter. "Strange things happen out there. Boats go missing, compasses spin like crazy. Nobody goes near it if they can help it." Jaden's stomach twisted. Ghost Rock. The name alone made his skin crawl. He started having dreams about the girls. In one, he saw them on the beach, laughing and running toward the water. But when he tried to follow, the sand turned to quicksand, pulling him down. He'd wake up sweating, the note still on his nightstand, the bracelet beside it. He hadn't told anyone about the bracelet yet, not even Marcus. It felt too big, too real. If it was Zoe's, it meant she'd been on that beach, maybe fighting to leave something behind. A clue. A cry for help. Jaden didn't know what to do with it, but he knew he couldn't let it go. One night, he and Marcus snuck into the library after hours. Marcus had a key from his summer job there, and pulled up every book they could find on local history, maps, anything that might mention Ghost Rock. Most of it was useless, but one old book, its pages yellowed and smelling of dust, had a map tucked inside. It was hand-drawn, faded, with a tiny dot circled in red ink labeled Unnamed Island. The coordinates were close to the ones in the note. Jaden's hands shook as he traced the map with his finger. "This is it," he whispered. Marcus looked over his shoulder, his usual smirk gone. "Okay, man," he said quietly. "What do we do now?" Jaden didn't have an answer. The note, the bracelet, the map, They were all pieces of something bigger, something that felt like it was closing in around him. He thought about the girls, about their families waiting for answers, about the pilot's haunted eyes. He thought about the woman on the bus, her trembling hand, her cryptic words. The truth is in the tides. Whatever it meant, Jaden was starting to believe he was the only one who could find it. But the ocean was deep, and the truth was out there, waiting, hidden in the waves. Jaden's sneakers crunched against the gravel as he and Marcus walked toward the docks, the old library map folded tightly in his jacket pocket. The air was thick with the smell of salt and fish, and the distant hum of boat engines mixed with the cries of gulls overhead. It was early morning, the sky still gray with the promise of dawn, and the town felt like it was holding its breath. Jaden hadn't slept much, his dreams haunted by images of waves crashing over that tiny island, of Zoe's star-shaped bracelet glinting in the sand. The note, the map, the bracelet, they were all he could think about, like puzzle pieces that refused to fit. Marcus, walking beside him, was quieter than usual, his usual jokes replaced by a nervous energy. "You sure about this, Jaden?" he asked, kicking a pebble into the water. "Sneaking around the docks at 5 a.m. ain't exactly our style." Jaden didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure of anything, but the pull of the mystery was stronger than his doubts. "We gotta start somewhere," he said finally, his voice low. "That boat in the Forum Post, it's the only lead we've got." The docks were a maze of rusted metal and weathered wood, lined with fishing boats and small yachts bobbing in the tide. Jaden had heard the rumors about the strange boat seen the night the girls vanished. No lights, no movement, just a shadow on the water. If it was real, someone at the docks might know something. The problem was, the fishermen weren't exactly the talkative type, especially not with two teenagers poking around before sunrise. Jaden's eyes scanned the boats, looking for anything out of place, anything that matched the description from the forum. Most were old, paint peeling, nets tangled on their decks. But one caught his eye, a sleek, black speedboat tucked at the far end of the dock, its hull gleaming like it didn't belong here. No name, no registration number, just a dark shape that seemed to swallow the light. "That's gotta be it," Jaden whispered, nudging Marcus. His friend squinted, then shook his head. "Man, you're seeing things. That's just some rich guy's toy." But Jaden wasn't so sure. Something about it felt wrong, like a secret hiding in plain sight. They crept closer, keeping low behind a stack of crates. The dock was quiet, but Jaden's heart was pounding so loud he was sure someone would hear it. He pulled out his phone, snapping a quick photo of the boat, the flash briefly lighting up the darkness. That's when he heard it, a low creak, like someone stepping onto the deck. He froze, grabbing Marcus's arm. A figure moved in the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying something heavy. Jaden couldn't make out the face, but the way the man moved, quick and deliberate, sent a chill down his spine. "Let's go," Marcus hissed, tugging at his sleeve. But Jaden couldn't move, his eyes locked on the figure. Was this connected to the girls? To the note? He wanted to run, but his feet felt glued to the ground, the weight of the bracelet in his pocket pulling him forward. Back in town, the mystery of the girls' disappearance was tearing at the seams of Crescent Beach. Amara's mom, Carla, had started a support group for the families, meeting every week at the community center. Jaden had seen her there once, dropping off flyers for the diner, her eyes red from crying but her voice steady as she spoke about her daughter. Amara was going to be a doctor, she'd said, clutching a photo of her smiling girl. She had plans, big ones. She wouldn't just leave. Lila's brother, Ethan, was only 12, but he'd taken to carrying her sketchbook everywhere, showing her drawings to anyone who'd listen, like they were proof she was still out there. Zoe's dad, Mike, was a different story. He'd stopped talking much, spending his days at the beach, staring at the horizon. Jaden had seen him there, a lonely figure against the waves, and it made his chest ache. These were real people, not just names on a missing poster, and the note in Jaden's pocket felt like a promise to them, even if he didn't know how to keep it. At school, the mood wasn't much better. The girls' absence was like a shadow over the hallways, their lockers still decorated with stickers and photos, untouched since last summer. Jaden's English teacher, Miss Carter, had been close to Lila, who'd always stayed after class to talk about books. She'd been quieter since the disappearance, her lessons lacking their usual spark. One day, she pulled Jaden aside after class, her eyes searching his. "You've been distracted, Jaden," she said softly. "Everything okay?" He wanted to tell her about the note, the bracelet, the boat at the docks, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he mumbled something about exams and hurried out, feeling her gaze on his back. He couldn't shake the feeling that people were starting to notice him, like the mystery was wrapping him up in its tendrils, pulling him deeper. Meanwhile, Tom Harper, the pilot, was struggling to hold on to his story. The news had moved on, calling his sighting a mistake, but he wasn't backing down. Jaden had overheard him at the diner, talking to a reporter who'd tracked him down. "I know what I saw," Tom said, his voice rough with frustration. "Three figures, clear as day, waving for help. I'm not crazy." But the reporter pushed back, asking about the empty island, the lack of evidence. Tom's hands shook as he gripped his coffee mug, his face pale. "Something's not right," he muttered. "That island, it's like it doesn't want to be found." Jaden, wiping down a table nearby, felt his stomach twist. Ghost Rock. The name kept coming up, whispered in corners, written in that old library book. He wanted to talk to Tom, to ask about the island, but the pilot left before he could work up the nerve. Jaden's own life was starting to fray at the edges. His mom was working longer hours, and Kaylee was acting out, getting in trouble at school for talking back to teachers. Jaden tried to be there for her, helping with homework, making sure she ate dinner, but his mind was elsewhere. The note was like a splinter under his skin, impossible to ignore. He and Marcus kept digging, spending late nights at the library, searching for anything about Ghost Rock. They found old newspaper clippings about missing boats, strange lights in the sky, compasses going haywire near that part of the Pacific. One article, from decades ago, mentioned a fisherman who'd washed up on Crescent Beach, half dead, ranting about an island that moved. The story was written off as delirium, but Jaden couldn't shake the chill it gave him. What if the island wasn't just a place? What if it was hiding something? Then there was the woman from the bus. Jaden couldn't stop thinking about her. He'd gone back to the bus stop where she'd gotten off, hoping to find some trace of her, but it was just a busy corner with a convenience store and a laundromat. He asked around, showing a sketch Marcus had done based on his description: gray hair, tired eyes, a heavy coat despite the summer heat. Nobody recognized her. It was like she'd vanished, just like the girls. Jaden started to wonder if she was connected to them, if she knew something about what happened that day on the beach. The coordinates in the note matched the island Tom had seen, but why give them to Jaden? Why not go to the police? Or the girls' families? The more he thought about it, the more he felt like he was being watched, like someone was waiting to see what he'd do next. One evening, Jaden and Marcus went back to the docks, determined to get a closer look at that black speedboat. The air was colder now, the wind sharp off the water, and the dock was empty except for a few late-night fishermen unloading their catch. They waited until the coast was clear, then crept toward the boat. Jaden's heart was in his throat as he climbed aboard, Marcus keeping watch from the shadows. The deck was clean, too clean, like it had been scrubbed of any evidence. Jaden found a small hatch near the back, locked tight with a heavy padlock. He tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. "Hurry up, man," Marcus whispered, his voice tight with nerves. That's when Jaden saw it, a faint scratch on the hatch, shaped like a star, just like Zoe's bracelet. His breath caught, his fingers brushing over the mark. Was it a coincidence? Or had Zoe been here, leaving a sign for someone to find? Before he could process it, a light flared in the distance, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Hey, who's there?" A voice shouted, gruff and angry. Jaden and Marcus bolted, ducking behind crates as heavy footsteps pounded closer. They ran until their lungs burned, not stopping until they were back in the park, panting under the streetlights. "That was too close," Marcus gasped, his hands on his knees. "We're done, Jaden. This is crazy." But Jaden wasn't done. The star on the hatch, the bracelet in his pocket, the note, they were all connected. He was sure of it. He just didn't know how or why or what he was supposed to do next. Back at home, Jaden couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the bracelet and note on his nightstand like silent accusations. He thought about the girls' families, about the pain in Carla's eyes, Ethan's small hands clutching Lila's sketchbook, Mike's lonely walks on the beach. He thought about Tom, risking his reputation to tell the truth, and the woman on the bus, her cryptic words echoing in his mind. The truth is in the tides. Jaden didn't know what he was chasing, but he knew he couldn't stop. The mystery was bigger than him, bigger than Crescent Beach, and it was pulling him towards something he couldn't yet see. Somewhere out there, on that strange island, the answers were waiting. Answers about Amara, Lila, and Zoe, about the note, about the boat in the dark. And Jaden was starting to realize that finding them might change everything. Jaden's hands trembled as he clutched the old library map, the edges fraying from being folded and unfolded too many times. It was late, the kind of late where the world felt too quiet, and his bedroom was lit only by the faint glow of his phone screen. The coordinates from the note stared back at him, burned into his memory now, alongside the image of that star-shaped scratch on the speedboat's hatch. He hadn't told Marcus about going back to the docks alone last night, hadn't told anyone about the figure he'd seen again, slipping into the shadows with a bag slung over their shoulder. The boat was still there, still unmarked, still wrong in a way Jaden couldn't explain. His heart raced every time he thought about it, about Zoe's bracelet in his pocket, about the words on the note. The truth is in the tides. He was close to something, he could feel it like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea what was below. But the closer he got, the more dangerous it felt, like the mystery was pushing back, warning him to stop. At school, Jaden was a ghost, barely hearing his teachers or noticing the worried looks from his friends. Marcus had backed off after their close call at the docks, saying he needed a break from playing detective. Jaden couldn't blame him. Marcus had a scholarship to think about, a future that didn't involve chasing shadows. But Jaden couldn't let it go. Every night, he pored over the map, the note, the blurry photo he'd taken of the speedboat. He'd started sketching the star symbol from memory, tracing it over and over until his notebook was filled with it. It was Zoe's, he was sure, a piece of her left behind like a breadcrumb. But what did it mean? Was she trying to tell him something? And why did it feel like someone was always watching just out of sight? The town was on edge, too. The pilot, Tom Harper, had gone quiet after the news called him unreliable, but Jaden had seen him at the diner again, sitting alone in a corner booth, his eyes hollow. Jaden worked up the nerve to approach him, sliding into the booth with a tray of coffee refills as an excuse. "Mr. Harper," he started, his voice shaky. "What did you really see out there? On that island?" Tom looked up, startled, like he hadn't expected anyone to care. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at Jaden with those tired eyes. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were there, kid. 3 girls, waving something white, like a shirt or a flag. I saw their faces, scared, but alive. And then they were gone. Like the island swallowed them." Jaden's stomach dropped. He wanted to show Tom the note, the bracelet, but something held him back. Trust was hard to come by these days. Back at home, Kaylee was getting worse. She'd been sent home from school for fighting, her small face bruised and defiant. Jaden tried to talk to her, but she just hugged Lila's sketchbook, borrowed from Ethan after a support group meeting, and said, "They're not coming back, are they?" Jaden didn't know how to answer. He wanted to believe Amara, Lila, and Zoe were out there, that the island wasn't a dead end, but the weight of it all was crushing him. His mom was no help either, too exhausted from her shifts to notice how quiet he'd gotten. Jaden felt alone, carrying a secret too big for one person. The bracelet, the note, the map, they were his burden now, and he didn't know how much longer he could carry them. Then came the break he'd been waiting for, or maybe dreading. He'd been scrolling through local forums late at night, eyes burning from the screen, when he found a new post. It was anonymous, like the one about the boat, but this one was different. "Ghost rock isn't what you think," it read. "The tides hide it, but it's there. Follow the stars." Jaden's breath caught. Stars. Like Zoe's bracelet, like the scratch on the hatch. The post included a grainy photo of a rocky outcrop in the ocean, barely visible through fog, with a faint light flickering on it. Jaden's hands shook as he saved the image. It was the island, it had to be. But the words "follow the stars" stuck with him, gnawing at his mind. Was it a clue? A warning? He didn't know, but he couldn't sit still anymore. Jaden decided to go back to the docks, alone this time. He waited until midnight, when the town was asleep, and the only sounds were the waves and the creak of boats against their moorings. The black speedboat was still there, its hull gleaming under the moonlight. He crept closer, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The hatch was still locked, the star-shaped scratch catching the light like it was taunting him. He pulled out Zoe's bracelet, holding it up to the mark. It was the same shape, the same size. His hands shook as he realized what it meant. Zoe had been on this boat, or near it, and she'd left this mark. But how? And why? Before he could think, a noise behind him made him freeze, a soft thud, like footsteps on the dock. He spun around, but no one was there. Just shadows, shifting in the wind. He backed away, his pulse racing, and ran home, the bracelet burning a hole in his pocket. The next day, Jaden went to the community center, where Carla was holding another support group meeting. He wasn't sure why he went, maybe to see if he could find answers, maybe just to feel less alone. The room was small, filled with folding chairs and the smell of burnt coffee. Amara's mom was there, her face lined with grief, and Ethan, clutching Lila's sketchbook like a lifeline. Zoe's dad, Mike, sat in the corner, staring at the floor. Jaden hesitated, then approached Carla, his voice low. "Mrs. Jones, did Amara ever talk about stars? Or an island?" Carla's eyes widened, and for a moment, Jaden thought she might cry. "Why are you asking?" she said, her voice sharp. He fumbled, unsure how much to say. "Just heard something," he mumbled, backing away. But Carla grabbed his arm, her grip tight. "If you know something, Jaden, you tell me. Please." He nodded, his throat tight, but he couldn't bring himself to show her the note. Not yet. That night, Jaden found something else in Lila's sketchbook, which Ethan had let him borrow. He'd been flipping through it, looking for anything that might connect to the mystery, when he saw a drawing tucked in the back. It was rough, done in pencil, but it showed a rocky island surrounded by waves, with 3 stars sketched in the sky above it. At the bottom, in Lila's neat handwriting, were the words, "The tides take, the stars give back." Jaden's heart stopped. It was too close to the note to the forum post to be a coincidence. Had Lila known something? Had she seen something that day on the beach? He wanted to show Ethan, but the kid was already so fragile, Jaden couldn't bear to drag him into this. Instead, he took a photo of the drawing, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. The tension in Crescent Beach was palpable now. People were talking about Ghost Rock like it was a living thing, a place that stole boats and people and hid them in its depths. Jaden overheard fishermen at the diner, their voices low, saying the island wasn't on any modern charts because it moved with the tides. It sounded like nonsense, but Jaden couldn't shake the feeling they were right. He started noticing things, strange glances from people at the diner, a car that seemed to follow him home one night, its headlights too bright in his rear-view mirror. He told himself he was paranoid, but the fear was real, creeping into his bones. Whoever was behind the girl's disappearance didn't want to be found, and Jaden was getting too close. He decided to track down the woman from the bus one last time. He went back to the convenience store near the bus stop, asking the clerk if he'd seen her. The guy, an older man with a bored expression, shrugged. "Lots of people come through here, kid." But as Jaden turned to leave, the clerk called out, "Wait, you mean the lady with the gray hair? Heavy coat? She was here a while back, bought a burner phone and left. Seemed nervous." Jaden's heart raced. A burner phone? That wasn't something an ordinary person used. He thanked the clerk and left, his mind spinning. Was she hiding? Running from something? Or was she part of it, whatever it was? The breaking point came when Jaden got a text from an unknown number. It was just one line. "Stop looking, or you'll end up like them." His blood ran cold. He showed it to Marcus, who'd reluctantly agreed to meet at the park again. Marcus's face paled as he read it. "Jaden, this is bad. Like really bad. We need to go to the cops." But Jaden shook his head. The police hadn't found the girls in 8 months. What made Marcus think they'd believe him now? Besides, the text felt personal, like whoever sent it knew about the note, the bracelet, the map. Jaden was scared, but he was also angry. Someone was out there, hiding the truth, and he was done feeling helpless. That night, Jaden made a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. The map, the note, the bracelet, Lila's drawing, they were all pointing to Ghost Rock. He didn't have a boat, but he knew someone who might. Old Mr. Thompson, the diner regular, had a fishing boat he hadn't used in years. Jaden had overheard him talking about it, saying it was still seaworthy, just sitting in storage. It was a long shot, but Jaden was out of options. He slipped out of the house at midnight, the bracelet and note in his pocket, the map tucked into his jacket. The docks were dark, the air heavy with fog. He found Mr. Thompson's boat, a rusty old thing that smelled of fish and diesel. He didn't know how to sail, but he'd figure it out. He had to. As he climbed aboard, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. "The tides are watching." Jaden's heart pounded, his hands slick with sweat. He looked out at the water, the waves black and endless under the moonless sky. Somewhere out there was Ghost Rock, and maybe Amara, Lila, and Zoe. The truth was waiting, but it felt like it was waiting to swallow him whole. He started the boat's engine, the rumble loud in the silence, and steered into the dark, the star-shaped bracelet heavy in his pocket, guiding him toward whatever lay ahead. The boat's engine sputtered as Jaden steered into the open water, the black waves stretching endlessly before him. The fog was thicker now, wrapping the world in a damp, suffocating blanket that made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. His hands gripped the wheel, slick with sweat, the star-shaped bracelet in his pocket feeling heavier with every passing second. The text message, "The tides are watching," burned in his mind, a warning he couldn't shake. He turned his phone off after that, half expecting another cryptic message to light up the screen. The coordinates from the note were plugged into the boat's ancient GPS, a flickering green, guiding him toward Ghost Rock. Jaden didn't know what he'd find. Amara, Lila, and Zoe, maybe, or answers to the questions that had consumed him for weeks. But the ocean felt alive, its waves whispering secrets, and Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that he was sailing into something much bigger than himself. The boat rocked as a wave hit, and Jaden's stomach lurched. He'd never been out on the water like this, not alone, not in the middle of the night. Mr. Thompson's fishing boat was old, its hull creaking with every swell, and Jaden prayed it would hold together long enough to get him to the island. He kept picturing Tom Harper's face, the pilot's haunted eyes as he described the girls waving from that rocky shore. They were there, Tom had said, scared but alive. Jaden clung to those words, letting them fuel him through the fear. He thought of Zoe's bracelet, the star scratched into the speedboat's hatch, Lila's drawing with its cryptic message, "The tides take, the stars give back." It all pointed to Ghost Rock, a place that seemed to exist only in whispers and nightmares. But as the boat pushed through the fog, Jaden's heart sank. The GPS was gone, the screen blank except for static. He tapped it, panic rising, but it stayed dead. The ocean was playing tricks, just like the fisherman said. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange out here, blurred by the fog and the endless rhythm of the waves. Jaden's eyes strained to see through the mist, searching for any sign of land. Then, faintly, he heard it, a low hum, like an engine, somewhere in the distance. His pulse quickened. Another boat? Out here, in the middle of nowhere? He cut the engine, letting the boat drift, the silence so thick it pressed against his ears. The hum grew louder, closer, and Jaden's breath caught as a shadow loomed through the fog, a sleek, black shape that looked too familiar. The speedboat from the docks. His hands froze on the wheel, his mind racing. Was it following him? Had someone seen him take Mr. Thompson's boat? The shadow passed, its engine fading into the night, but Jaden's heart didn't slow. Whoever was on that boat knew he was out here, and they didn't want him to reach Ghost Rock. He restarted the engine, pushing the boat faster. The coordinates still burned into his memory even without the GPS. The fog began to thin, and there it was, a jagged outline against the horizon, barely visible in the pre-dawn light. Ghost Rock. It was smaller than he'd imagined, a barren chunk of stone rising from the sea, its edges sharp and unwelcoming. Jaden's throat tightened as he steered closer, the waves growing rougher, like the ocean itself was trying to push him back. He scanned the shore, looking for any sign of the girls, of the white cloth Tom had seen, but the island looked empty, lifeless. Then he saw it, a flicker of light, quick and faint, like a signal. His heart leapt. Was it them? He killed the engine, letting the boat drift closer, his eyes locked on the shore. That's when he noticed something else, a small, weathered buoy bobbing in the water, painted with a star. Zoe's star. His hands shook as he reached for the bracelet in his pocket, the pieces clicking together in his mind. Before he could process it, the hum of the other boat returned, louder now, closing in fast. Jaden's head snapped around, but the fog had thickened again, hiding the speedboat. He fumbled for the boat's radio, hoping to call for help, but it was dead, just like the GPS panic clawed at his chest. He was alone, miles from shore, with no way to call for backup. The hum grew deafening, and then the speedboat broke through the fog, its black hull cutting through the waves like a knife. Jaden saw two figures on deck, their faces hidden in the shadows, but one of them held something that glinted in the dim light, a metal object, long and sharp. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. They were here for him, for the note, for whatever truth he was chasing. He gunned the engine, steering toward the island, the only place he might have a chance to hide. As the boat lurched forward, Jaden's eyes caught something on the shore, a pile of rocks arranged in a shape that didn't look natural. It was a star just like the one on the buoy, the bracelet, the hatch. His heart pounded. The girls had been here, he was sure of it. But where were they now? The speedboat was gaining, its engine roaring, and Jaden knew he didn't have much time. He steered toward a narrow cove, the rocks scraping the boat's hull as he squeezed through. The island loomed above him, its cliffs dark and jagged, and for a moment, he thought he saw movement, a shadow darting between the rocks. Amara? Lila? Zoe, he called, his voice hoarse, swallowed by the wind. No answer, but the flicker of light came again, brighter now, from somewhere deep in the cove. He tied the boat to a jagged outcrop, his hands shaking so badly he could barely knot the rope, and climbed onto the shore, the bracelet clutched tight in his fist. The island felt wrong, like it was watching him. The air was heavy, the rocks slick with seaweed, and every step echoed with the crash of waves. Jaden followed the light, his sneakers slipping on the uneven ground, until he reached a small cave carved into the cliff. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough to squeeze through, but the light was coming from inside, pulsing like a heartbeat. He hesitated, the text flashing in his mind. Stop looking, or you'll end up like them. But he'd come too far to turn back. He slipped into the cave, the air cold and damp, the walls glistening with moisture. The light grew brighter, and then he saw it, a small, battered notebook, half buried in the sand, its cover marked with a star. Jaden's breath caught as he picked it up, recognizing Lila's handwriting instantly. It was her sketchbook, but different, filled with frantic notes and drawings of the island, of stars, of a boat with no name. One page had a single sentence, "They know we're here." Before he could read more, a sound echoed behind him, a low, deliberate scrape, like a boot on stone. Jaden spun around, his heart in his throat, but the cave was empty. Or was it? The shadows seemed to move, shifting in ways that didn't match the flickering light. He shoved the notebook into his jacket, his hands trembling, and backed toward the entrance. That's when he heard the engine again, closer now, right outside the cove. The speedboat had found him. Jaden's mind raced. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide on this tiny island. He clutched the notebook tighter, Lila's words burning in his mind. They know we're here. Who were they? The people on the speedboat? The woman from the bus? Someone else, something bigger? The light in the cave flickered again, and Jaden saw something new, a faint outline on the wall, scratched into the rock, 3 stars, linked together, pointing deeper into the cave. He didn't have time to think. The scrape of boots came again, closer, and a shadow loomed at the cave's entrance. Jaden's breath hitched as he ducked behind a rock, his heart pounding so loud he was sure they'd hear it. The figure stepped into the cave, their silhouette tall and menacing, the glint of that metal object still in their hand. Jaden's eyes darted to the stars on the wall, to the notebook in his jacket, to Zoe's bracelet in his pocket. Everything was connected. Amara, Lila, Zoe, the island, the note. But the truth was still out of reach, hidden in the tides, in the shadows closing in around him. The figure took another step, their boots crunching on the sand, and Jaden realized he was out of time. Whatever was waiting in the depths of that cave, whatever truth the stars were pointing to, he had to find it now, before the tides took him, too. Jaden's breath was shallow, his back pressed against the cold, damp rock as the figure's shadow loomed larger in the cave's entrance. The flickering light from deeper within the cave cast jagged patterns on the walls, and the 3 stars scratched into the rock seemed to pulse, urging him forward. His hands gripped Lila's notebook and Zoe's bracelet, the weight of them grounding him even as his heart raced. The figure's boots crunched closer, the glint of the metal object in their hand catching the light, a knife, Jaden realized, his stomach twisting. The speedboat's engine idled just outside the cove, a low growl that echoed through the cave like a warning. Jaden's eyes darted to the star-shaped markings on the wall, pointing deeper into the darkness. He didn't know what was waiting there, but he knew he couldn't stay where he was. With a final glance at the approaching figure, he slipped deeper into the cave, following the stars, his sneakers silent on the sandy floor. The tunnel narrowed, the air growing colder and heavier with the smell of salt and decay. The light pulsed brighter, guiding him to a small chamber where the cave opened up. Jaden's breath caught as he saw them. Amara, Lila, and Zoe huddled together against the far wall, their faces pale and gaunt but alive. Their clothes were tattered, their eyes wide with fear, but they were real, not ghosts or mirages. "Jaden," Amara whispered, her voice hoarse, like she couldn't believe it. Zoe's eyes locked on the bracelet in his hand, tears welling up. "You found it," she said softly, her voice trembling. Lila clutched a piece of cloth, the same white fabric Tom Harper had seen from the air, her fingers shaking as she held it out like a lifeline. Jaden's heart pounded with relief, but the sound of boots behind him snapped him back to reality. "We have to go," he whispered, his voice urgent. "They're coming." Amara nodded, her jaw tight, and helped Lila and Zoe to their feet. They were weak, their movements slow, but there was a fire in their eyes that hadn't been extinguished. "They kept us here," Amara said, her voice low and fierce. "They didn't think anyone would find us." Jaden wanted to ask who they were, but there was no time. The footsteps were closer now, and the cave's walls seemed to close in, the flickering light casting shadows that danced like predators. Jaden led the girls toward the back of the chamber, where the star markings pointed to a narrow passage. It was a risk, but staying meant facing whoever was on that speedboat, and Jaden wasn't sure he could protect them alone. The passage was tight, the rocks scraping their arms as they squeezed through, the light fading behind them. As they moved, Lila whispered what had happened. "We were on the beach that day," she said, her voice barely audible over the drip of water in the cave. "A boat came, no lights, just like the one you saw. They took us, said it was a mistake, that we'd seen something we shouldn't have." Her words were rushed, her eyes darting back toward the chamber. "They brought us here, to this island. They said the tides would hide us." Jaden's mind raced, connecting the dots, the black speedboat, the woman on the bus, the note. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice sharp. Zoe's voice was a whisper. "We don't know their names, but they're watching the coast, moving things people. They didn't want us to talk." Jaden's blood ran cold. Smugglers? Traffickers? Something worse? The note's words echoed in his head. "The truth is in the tides." The passage opened into another chamber, this one larger, with a pool of water at its center, reflecting the faint light from a crack in the ceiling. The stars on the wall were bigger here, carved deep, and Jaden realized they weren't just symbols. They were a map, pointing to a hidden exit on the other side of the island. But before he could move, a voice cut through the silence, low and cold. "You shouldn't have come here, kid." Jaden spun around, his heart stopping as the figure from the cave's entrance stepped into the light. It was a man, tall and broad, his face half hidden by a cap, the knife in his hand gleaming. Behind him was another figure, the woman from the bus, her gray hair loose now, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Jaden's breath hitched. She wasn't just a stranger. She was part of this, whatever this was. "You gave me the note," Jaden said, his voice shaking but defiant. "Why?" The woman's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I wanted to see if you'd follow it," she said, her voice calm, like she was talking about the weather. "You're a good kid, Jaden. Too good for this." She stepped closer, and the girls flinched, pressing against the wall. Amara's eyes burned with anger, but she stayed quiet, her hand on Lila's shoulder. The man with the knife took a step forward, his gaze locked on Jaden. "You've seen too much," he said, his voice like gravel. "Just like they did." Jaden's mind raced, searching for a way out. The pool of water, the stars on the wall, the exit they hadn't reached yet. There had to be a way to get the girls to safety. Then Zoe moved, fast and desperate, throwing the white cloth at the man's face. It was enough to startle him, and Jaden seized the moment, grabbing a loose rock and hurling it at the man's hand. The knife clattered to the ground, and Amara shouted, "Run." They bolted toward the exit, Jaden leading the way, the girls stumbling behind him. The woman didn't move, just watched, her eyes unreadable as the man cursed and scrambled for his knife. The passage was narrow, the rocks sharp, but Jaden pushed forward, his heart pounding. They burst out onto the other side of the island, the dawn breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Mr. Thompson's boat was still tied up in the cove, but the speedboat was circling, its engine roaring like a predator. Jaden helped the girls onto the boat, his hands shaking as he untied the rope. "We're getting out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. The engine sputtered to life, and he steered away from the island. The speedboat's hum growing louder behind them. Amara took the wheel, her hands steadier than Jaden's, and he turned to check on Lila and Zoe, who were huddled together. Scadenza. System. The narrative abruptly ends mid-sentence, which seems unintentional. Since you've requested the climax with a resolution to the main conflicts and a final twist, I'll continue from where the previous section left off, ensuring a complete and satisfying climax while maintaining the suspenseful tone, natural dialogue, and human-centric focus. The story will resolve the key plot points, Jaden's quest, the girl's disappearance, and the mystery of the note, while introducing a final twist to keep the audience engaged, all while adhering to YouTube's content policies and incorporating relevant keywords seamlessly. Jaden helped the girls onto the boat, his hands shaking as he untied the rope. "We're getting out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. The engine sputtered to life, and he steered away from the island, the speedboat's hum growing louder behind them. Amara took the wheel, her hands steadier than Jaden's, and he turned to check on Lila and Zoe, who were huddled together, their faces pale but determined. "We're okay," Lila whispered, clutching her notebook, its pages filled with the frantic sketches and words that had guided Jaden here. Zoe's eyes were fixed on the bracelet in his hand, the star charm glinting in the dawn light. "You found us," she said, her voice breaking. Jaden nodded, but his eyes were on the speedboat, its black hull cutting through the waves, gaining fast. He didn't know how they'd outrun it, or what would happen when they reached the mainland. The truth was out, but it wasn't safe yet. The ocean churned around them, the waves growing rougher as the fog burned away under the rising sun. Jaden's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon for any sign of help, a fishing boat, a Coast Guard cutter, anything. But the sea was empty, except for the speedboat closing in. Amara pushed the old fishing boat to its limit, the engine groaning, but it was no match for the sleek vessel behind them. "They're not gonna let us go," Zoe said, her voice trembling. Jaden's mind raced, replaying Lila's words in the cave. "They're watching the coast, moving things, people." Smugglers, he thought, or something worse. People powerful enough to make 3 girls vanish and keep an island hidden. The note's words echoed in his head. "The truth is in the tides." He glanced at Lila's notebook, now tucked into his jacket, and realized it might hold more than just clues, it might be evidence. Suddenly, a crackle broke through the silence. The boat's radio, which Jaden had thought was dead, sputtered to life. A voice came through, faint but clear. "This is Coast Guard Station Crescent Beach. Identify yourself." Jaden's heart leapt. He grabbed the radio, his voice shaking as he shouted, "This is Jaden Carter, on a fishing boat off Ghost Rock. I've got Amara Jones, Lila Chun, and Zoe Martinez with me. We're being chased. Black speedboat, no markings. We need help." The radio crackled again, the voice sharp. "Copy that. Hold your position. We're dispatching a cutter now." Jaden exhaled, relief flooding through him, but it was short-lived. The speedboat was almost on them, its engine roaring like a beast. He could see the 2 figures on deck now, the man with the knife and another, smaller figure, their faces still hidden. Amara steered toward a cluster of rocks jutting out of the water, a desperate move to slow the speedboat down. The fishing boat scraped against the rocks, the hull shuddering, but it bought them a moment. Jaden turned to the girls, his voice urgent. "If we don't make it, you need to tell them about the notebook. It's got everything, Lila's drawings, the stars, the boat." Lila nodded, her eyes fierce despite her fear. "We'll make it," she said, gripping Zoe's hand. But the speedboat was relentless, pulling alongside them now, close enough for Jaden to see the man's face, hard, lined, with eyes that held no mercy. The second figure stepped forward, and Jaden's breath caught. It was the woman from the bus, her gray hair whipping in the wind, her expression unreadable. She wasn't holding a weapon, but her presence was just as threatening. "Stop the boat, kid," the man shouted, his voice carrying over the waves. "You don't know what you're messing with." Jaden's hands clenched into fists, anger rising over his fear. "I know enough," he yelled back. "You took them. You hid them on that island." The woman's lips twitched, almost a smile, and she raised a hand, signaling the man to hold back. "You're brave, Jaden," she called, her voice calm but chilling. "But bravery won't save you." Before Jaden could respond, a new sound cut through the air, a deep, thundering hum. A Coast Guard cutter appeared on the horizon, its lights flashing, its siren blaring. The speedboat hesitated, the man cursing as he glanced at the approaching vessel. The woman's eyes locked on Jaden's, and for a moment, he thought he saw something like regret in them. Then the speedboat turned sharply, speeding away into the fading fog. The cutter reached them minutes later, its crew pulling the fishing boat alongside. Jaden helped Amara, Lila, and Zoe aboard, his legs shaking as the adrenaline drained from him. The Coast Guard officers were all business, wrapping blankets around the girls and asking questions Jaden could barely answer. "We found them on Ghost Rock," he said, handing over Lila's notebook and Zoe's bracelet. "There's more in there, drawings, notes. It's all connected to that speedboat." The officer in charge, a woman with a stern face, nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at the girls. "You did good, kid," she said. "We'll take it from here." Jaden wanted to believe her, but the woman's words from the speedboat echoed in his mind. "You don't know what you're messing with." He glanced at the girls, safe now but still shaken, and felt a weight lift, but not completely. Back in Crescent Beach, the town erupted with relief and disbelief. Amara, Lila, and Zoe were reunited with their families, the community center filled with tears and hugs. Carla held Amara so tightly, it looked like she'd never let go, while Ethan clung to Lila's sketchbook, grinning through his tears. Mike, Zoe's dad, just stood there, his hand on her shoulder, like he was afraid she'd vanish again. Jaden stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, his heart full but his mind uneasy. The Coast Guard had taken the notebook and bracelet, promising a full investigation into the speedboat and Ghost Rock. The news was calling it a miracle, the story of 3 girls found alive after 8 months, but Jaden knew it wasn't over. The woman from the bus, the man with the knife, they were still out there, and the note's cryptic message felt like a promise of more to come. That night, Jaden sat in his room, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on him. His mom was downstairs, finally home from her shift, her voice lighter than it had been in months. Kaylee was asleep, her small frame curled up with one of Lila's sketches, a gift from the girls for Jaden's help. He should have felt relieved, but the final twist was waiting, tucked into his jacket pocket. When he'd gotten home, he'd found a new note slipped under his door, written in the same shaky handwriting as the first. It was simple, just 3 words, "The stars aren't done." Jaden's heart stopped, his eyes darting to the window, half expecting to see the woman's face in the dark. The girls were safe, the truth was out, but the tides were still moving, hiding secrets he hadn't uncovered. Someone or something was still watching, and Jaden realized the mystery of Ghost Rock wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jaden helped the girls onto the boat, his hands shaking as he untied the rope. "We're getting out of here," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. The engine sputtered to life, and he steered away from the island. The speedboat's hum growing louder behind them. Amara took the wheel, her hands steadier than Jaden's, and he turned to check on Lila and Zoe, who were huddled together, their faces pale but determined. "We're okay," Lila whispered, clutching her notebook, its pages filled with the frantic sketches and words that had guided Jaden here. Zoe's eyes were fixed on the bracelet in his hand, the star charm glinting in the dawn light. "You found us," she said, her voice breaking. Jaden nodded, but his eyes were on the speedboat, its black hull cutting through the waves, gaining fast. He didn't know how they'd outrun it, or what would happen when they reached the mainland. The truth was out, but it wasn't safe yet. The ocean churned around them, the waves growing rougher as the fog burned away under the rising sun. Jaden's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon for any sign of help, a fishing boat, a Coast Guard cutter, anything. But the sea was empty, except for the speedboat closing in. Amara pushed the old fishing boat to its limit, the engine groaning, but it was no match for the sleek vessel behind them. "They're not going to let us go," Zoe said, her voice trembling. Jaden's mind raced, replaying Lila's words in the cave. "They're watching the coast, moving things, people." Smugglers, he thought, or something worse. People powerful enough to make 3 girls vanish and keep an island hidden. The note's words echoed in his head. "The truth is in the tides." He glanced at Lila's notebook, now tucked into his jacket, and realized it might hold more than just clues, it might be evidence. Suddenly, a crackle broke through the silence. The boat's radio, which Jaden had thought was dead, sputtered to life. A voice came through, faint but clear. "This is Coast Guard Station Crescent Beach. Identify yourself." Jaden's heart leapt. He grabbed the radio, his voice shaking as he shouted, "This is Jaden Carter, on a fishing boat off Ghost Rock. I've got Amara Jones, Lila Chin, and Zoe Martinez with me. We're being chased. Black speedboat, no markings. We need help." The radio crackled again, the voice sharp. "Copy that. Hold your position. We're dispatching a cutter now." Jaden exhaled, relief flooding through him, but it was short-lived. The speedboat was almost on them, its engine roaring like a beast. He could see the 2 figures on deck now, the man with the knife and another, smaller figure, their faces still hidden. Amara steered toward a cluster of rocks jutting out of the water, a desperate move to slow the speedboat down. The fishing boat scraped against the rocks, the hull shuddering, but it bought them a moment. Jaden turned to the girls, his voice urgent. "If we don't make it, You need to tell them about the notebook. It's got everything. Lila's drawings, the stars, the boat. Lila nodded, her eyes fierce despite her fear. We'll make it, she said, gripping Zoe's hand. But the speedboat was relentless, pulling alongside them now, close enough for Jaden to see the man's face, hard, lined, with eyes that held no mercy. The second figure stepped forward, and Jaden's breath caught. It was the woman from the bus, her gray hair whipping in the wind, her expression unreadable. She wasn't holding a weapon, but her presence was just as threatening. Stop the boat, kid, the man shouted, his voice carrying over the waves. You don't know what you're messing with. Jaden's hands clenched into fists, anger rising over his fear. I know enough, he yelled back. You took them. You hid them on that island. The woman's lips twitched, almost a smile, and she raised a hand, signaling the man to hold back. You're brave, Jaden, she called, her voice calm but chilling. But bravery won't save you. Before Jaden could respond, a new sound cut through the air, a deep, thundering hum. A Coast Guard cutter appeared on the horizon, its lights flashing, its siren blaring. The speedboat hesitated, the man cursing as he glanced at the approaching vessel. The woman's eyes locked on Jaden's, and for a moment, he thought he saw something like regret in them. Then the speedboat turned sharply, speeding away into the fading fog. The cutter reached them minutes later, its crew pulling the fishing boat alongside. Jaden helped Amara, Lila, and Zoe aboard, his legs shaking as the adrenaline drained from him. The Coast Guard officers were all business, wrapping blankets around the girls and asking questions Jaden could barely answer. We found them on Ghost Rock, he said, handing over Lila's notebook and Zoe's bracelet. There's more in there, drawings, notes. It's all connected to that speedboat. The officer in charge, a woman with a stern face, nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at the girls. You did good, kid, she said. We'll take it from here. Jaden wanted to believe her, but the woman's words from the speedboat echoed in his mind. You don't know what you're messing with. He glanced at the girls, safe now but still shaken, and felt a weight lift, but not completely. Back in Crescent Beach, the town erupted with relief and disbelief. Amara, Lila, and Zoe were reunited with their families, the community center filled with tears and hugs. Carla held Amara so tightly it looked like she'd never let go, while Ethan clung to Lila's sketchbook, grinning through his tears. Mike, Zoe's dad, just stood there, his hand on her shoulder, like he was afraid she'd vanish again. Jaden stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, his heart full but his mind uneasy. The Coast Guard had taken the notebook and bracelet, promising a full investigation into the speedboat and Ghost Rock. The news was calling it a miracle, the story of 3 girls found alive after 8 months, but Jaden knew it wasn't over. The woman from the bus, the man with the knife, they were still out there, and the note's cryptic message felt like a promise of more to come. That night, Jaden sat in his room, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on him. His mom was downstairs, finally home from her shift, her voice lighter than it had been in months. Kaylee was asleep, her small frame curled up with one of Lila's sketches, a gift from the girls for Jaden's help. He should have felt relieved, but the final twist was waiting, tucked into his jacket pocket. When he'd gotten home, he'd found a new note slipped under his door, written in the same shaky handwriting as the first. It was simple, just 3 words. The stars aren't done. Jaden's heart stopped, his eyes darting to the window, half expecting to see the woman's face in the dark. The girls were safe, the truth was out, but the tides were still moving, hiding secrets he hadn't uncovered. Someone or something was still watching, and Jaden realized the mystery of Ghost Rock wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jaden sat on the edge of his bed, the new note crumpled in his hand, its words, "The stars aren't done," etched into his mind like a scar. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of the old apartment building settling. His mom's laughter drifted up from the kitchen, a rare sound these days, mingling with Kaylee's chatter about a drawing Lila had given her. The town of Crescent Beach was still buzzing with the news of Amara, Lila, and Zoe's return, the air thick with relief and questions that no one could fully answer. Jaden's heart should have been light. He'd found the girls, brought them home, done what no one else had. But the note in his hand felt like a weight, a reminder that the mystery of Ghost Rock wasn't finished with him. He glanced at the window, half expecting to see the woman from the bus staring back, her gray hair catching the moonlight, her eyes sharp and knowing. But there was nothing, just the dark, empty street below. The days after the rescue were a blur. The Coast Guard had taken Lila's notebook and Zoe's bracelet, promising a thorough investigation into the black speedboat and the shadowy figures who'd held the girls on Ghost Rock. Jaden had told them everything about the note from the bus, the coordinates, the star-shaped markings, the cryptic texts. The officer, Lieutenant Rivera, had listened with a mix of skepticism and admiration, her stern face softening as she jotted down his story. "You're a brave kid, Jaden," she'd said, echoing the woman from the bus in a way that made his skin crawl. "But you need to let us handle it now. These people, they're dangerous." Jaden had nodded, but the note he'd found under his door last night told him the danger wasn't gone. Whoever they were, smugglers, traffickers, or something else, they knew his name, his address, his every move. And they weren't done. At school, things were different now. The hallways felt lighter, the shadow of the girl's disappearance lifted, but Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on him. Amara, Lila, and Zoe were back, though they hadn't returned to classes yet, still recovering at home with their families. Jaden had visited them at the community center, where Carla had hugged him so tightly he thought his ribs might crack. "You brought my girl back," she'd whispered, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, Lila's little brother, had given Jaden a fist bump, his grin wide as he clutched her sketchbook, now returned by the Coast Guard. Mike, Zoe's dad, had just shaken Jaden's hand, his grip firm but his eyes distant, like he was still processing that his daughter was safe. The girls had thanked him, their voices soft but fierce, promising to tell the police everything they knew about their captors. But Jaden could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear he felt every time he thought about that final note. Marcus was back to his old self, cracking jokes and trying to drag Jaden into pickup basketball games, but even he was shaken. "Man, you're like a hero now," he'd said one afternoon at the park, tossing a ball between his hands. "But you gotta let this go. The cops are on it, right?" Jaden had nodded, but he didn't believe it. The police hadn't found the girls in 8 months. What made Marcus think they'd catch the people behind Ghost Rock? The speedboat had vanished into the fog, and the woman from the bus was a ghost, leaving no trace except the notes that haunted Jaden's dreams. He'd gone back to the convenience store near the bus stop, asking the clerk if he'd seen her again, but the man just shook his head. "People come and go, kid," he'd said, shrugging. Jaden had left feeling more alone than ever, the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. The Coast Guard's investigation moved slowly, or at least it felt that way to Jaden. Lieutenant Rivera called him in for a follow-up interview, asking about the woman from the bus, the texts, the star markings. Jaden told her about the new note, handing it over with a sinking feeling. Rivera's face tightened as she read it, her fingers tracing the shaky handwriting. "We're looking into it," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She told him they'd found no trace of the speedboat, no records of it docking at Crescent Beach or anywhere else. Ghost Rock itself was a mystery, barely on any modern charts, just a speck in the Pacific that seemed to slip through the cracks of every map. The fishermen's stories about compasses spinning and boats vanishing started to feel less like superstition and more like truth. Jaden left the station with more questions than answers, the note's words echoing in his head. The stars aren't done. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman from the bus. Why had she chosen him? Why give him the note in the first place? Only to show up on that speedboat, part of the same darkness that had taken the girls. Jaden spent hours at the library, digging through old records, trying to find anything that might explain her. He found nothing, no missing persons matching her description, no local history that tied her to Crescent Beach. But one evening, as he flipped through a dusty maritime journal, he found a mention of a woman who'd lived in town decades ago, a sailor's widow who'd vanished after her husband's boat went missing near Ghost Rock. The article described her as quiet, with gray hair and a heavy coat, always talking about the stars guiding her husband home. Jaden's heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be her. She'd been pregnant on the bus, and this woman would be ancient by now. But the coincidence was too much, and the idea of her lingered like a ghost. Kaylee was the one who pulled Jaden out of his spiral. She'd been quieter since the girls came back, her usual defiance softened by the sketches Lila had given her. One night, as Jaden sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo of Lila's drawing, the island with 3 stars above it, Kaylee plopped down beside him. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked, her voice small but sharp. Jaden sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, I can't help it." Kaylee frowned, then slid one of Lila's sketches toward him. It was a simple drawing of the beach, with a single star in the sky. "Lila said the stars meant hope," she said. Maybe that's what you're supposed to find. Jaden looked at her, surprised by the wisdom in her words. Maybe the stars weren't just a clue. Maybe they were a reminder to keep going, even when the truth felt out of reach. Inspired by Kaylee, Jaden decided to talk to Tom Harper, the pilot who'd first seen the girls on Ghost Rock. He found him at the diner, sitting in his usual booth, his coffee untouched. Tom looked older now, his face lined with the weight of being called a liar by half the town. Jaden slid into the booth across from him, his voice low. Mr. Harper, I need to know more about what you saw. The girls, they said the island hid them. Do you think it's still hiding something? Tom's eyes met his, and for a moment, Jaden thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. That place, it's not just an island, kid. I've flown over it a dozen times since, and it's never in the same spot twice. The tides move it or something does. And those lights I saw, they weren't normal. They flickered like stars, but they were coming from the water. Jaden's skin prickled. Stars in the water. Like the buoy, the bracelet, the markings. Like Lila's drawing. Tom's words stayed with Jaden as he walked home, the night air cold against his skin. He started to piece it together, the island, the stars, the tides. Maybe Ghost Rock wasn't just a place. Maybe it was a cover, a hiding spot for something bigger, something the woman and her accomplice were protecting. The girls had seen something they shouldn't have. Lila had said, a boat, a deal, a secret. Jaden's mind flashed to the forum post about the speedboat with no lights, the old newspaper clipping about the fisherman who'd washed up raving about a moving island. It was all connected, but the truth was still slippery, like trying to hold water in his hands. He thought about going to the police again, but what could he say? That an island moved? That a woman who might not exist was leaving him notes? He needed proof, something solid to tie it all together. The breakthrough came a week later, when Lieutenant Rivera called him to the station. She looked tired, her desk cluttered with files, but there was a spark in her eyes. We found something, she said, sliding a photo across the desk. It was the black speedboat, beached on a rocky shore miles from Crescent Beach, abandoned. No prints, no registration, but we found this inside. She handed him a small, waterlogged journal, its pages marked with the same star symbol Jaden had seen everywhere. It wasn't Lila's, it was older, the writing faded but legible. Jaden's hands shook as he read the entries. Dates, coordinates, names of boats and people, all tied to shipments moving through the Pacific. It was a ledger, evidence of a smuggling ring operating out of Ghost Rock, using the island's strange, shifting nature to stay hidden. The final entry mentioned 3 girls, witnesses, who needed to be contained. Jaden's stomach turned. This was it, the truth the tides had hidden. Rivera told him the Coast Guard was working with federal agents now, tracking the names in the ledger. The woman from the bus wasn't mentioned, but Jaden described her again. Every detail he could remember. Rivera nodded, her face grim. We think she's a scout, someone who watches the town, picks out threats. That note she gave you, it was a test, Jaden. To see if you dig deeper. Jaden's throat tightened. A test he'd passed, but at what cost? The ledger was enough to start arrests, Rivera said, but the woman and the man with the knife were still out there, ghosts in the system. Stay vigilant, she warned. And stay out of trouble. Jaden promised he would, but the note under his door told him trouble wasn't done with him. Back at home, life started to settle. Amara, Lila, and Zoe were healing, slowly returning to school, their laughter filling the hallways again. Jaden saw them one day at the diner, sharing a plate of fries, their faces brighter, but still marked by what they'd been through. Zoe caught his eye and smiled, holding up her wrist where the star-shaped bracelet now sat, a gift returned. You're one of us now, she said, her voice warm. Jaden smiled back, but his heart was heavy. He hadn't told them about the new note, hadn't told anyone. It felt like his burden, his secret to carry until he could make sense of it. He started spending more time with Kaylee, helping her with her homework, taking her to the beach to draw. The ocean didn't scare him anymore, but it didn't feel safe either. It held too many secrets, too many shadows. One evening, Jaden went back to Crescent Beach, the place where it all began. The dunes were quiet, the waves gentle under a sky full of stars. He sat in the sand, the new note in his pocket, and thought about what Kaylee had said about hope. The girls were home, their families whole again, and that was enough for now. But the stars above him felt alive, watching, like they were waiting for his next move. He thought about the woman, her cryptic words, her role in pulling him into this. Maybe she'd wanted him to find the girls, to expose the smuggling ring, but why? Was she a traitor to her own people, or was she playing a deeper game? Jaden didn't know, and maybe he never would. But he knew one thing. The truth wasn't just in the tides, it was in him, in the choices he made, the risks he took. As he stood to leave, his phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. His heart skipped, expecting another threat, another riddle. But this one was different. "You did good, kid. Keep looking up." Jaden stared at the screen, his breath catching. It was her handwriting, her voice, but softer, less menacing. He looked at the stars, their light steady and bright, and felt a strange calm settle over him. The mystery of Ghost Rock wasn't fully solved. The woman, the man, the shifting island still lingered in the shadows, but Jaden had done what he could. He'd brought the girls home, exposed the truth, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep the stars shining. The weeks turned to months, and Crescent Beach began to heal. The diner was busy again, the regulars swapping stories about the girls' return instead of their disappearance. Mr. Thompson gave Jaden a nod every time he came in, his old fishing boat back in storage, a silent thank you for what Jaden had done. Marcus started talking about college, dragging Jaden to campus tours, promising they'd stay friends no matter what. Jaden's mom noticed the change in him, the way he carried himself a little taller, and she started taking nights off to spend with him and Kaylee. The town still whispered about Ghost Rock, about the tides and the stars, but the fear was fading, replaced by a quiet pride in their own, a kid who'd faced the dark and brought back light. Jaden kept the notes, both of them, in a box under his bed, along with the photo of Lila's drawing and the blurry image of the speedboat. He didn't look at them often, but they were there, a reminder of what he'd been through, what he'd learned. The stars weren't done, the woman had said, and maybe she was right. There were more truths out there, more mysteries waiting in the tides. But for now, Jaden was content to walk the beach with Kaylee, to laugh with Marcus, to watch Amara, Lila, and Zoe rebuild their lives. The ocean stretched before him, vast and unknowable, but under the stars, it felt a little less daunting. He'd faced it once, and he could face it again. Whatever came next, Jaden knew he'd keep looking up, chasing the light, because that's what the stars and the truth demanded.